Hey, how's it going? This is the part 4 of our Next.js tutorial. I'm going to show you how to set up something called Tailwind CSS. And along the way, we're going to learn how Next.js expects you to compile or to configure your Webpack and also do custom Babel configurations and make sure that our PostCSS loader is working. So, to kind of explain what Tailwind is for a second before we get into it, in case anybody's not familiar, Tailwind is it's a CSS utility framework, and I have to imagine it has some sort of relationship with Laravel because, most projects that I see that's using Tailwind CSS is actually a Laravel installation. And I'm not up to date with the new Laravel stuff, so I'm not even going to talk about it any longer. But what Tailwind does is it actually gives you some utility classes. So instead of if we looked at something like Bootstrap or Materialize or Spectre CSS, like any of these like UI frameworks that give you like components and stuff, Tailwind is not like that at all. So this is Spectre CSS. It's a complete CSS, no JavaScript UI library. And if you've ever used Bootstrap, then you know exactly what we're looking at here. Tailwind is something completely different. What Tailwind does is it gives you these classes, and it gives you a configuration file so that you can configure your project to have the absolute most clean CSS possible. You don't have to worry about overwriting default Bootstrap styles. You don't have to load in a massive framework. You can kind of create your own style guide, and it's very, very cool. So as far as configuration is concerned, Tailwind gives you this default configuration, and then basically you can just copy this into your project, and it'll give you something crazy like 13,000 CSS rules, and you'll have classes for everything. And something that I recommend checking out if you are interested in Tailwind CSS is this guy Adam Wattham, whatever his name is. He's actually got some videos about like how to use Tailwind CSS, and it's really good. I think there's a video on YouTube. It's called rebuilding Laravel.io with Tailwind CSS, and it's this guy Adam. And I gotta just tell you that this video is great. You will learn everything you need to know about Tailwind in here if you're interested, and it's actually pretty cool to see the process of the person who went ahead and redesigned Laravel.io, which is their community forum basically. So it's pretty cool. It's a pretty neat video, and kind of shows off Tailwind a little bit. But for this project, what we're gonna do is we're just gonna require Tailwind, just kind of as an excuse to compile Webpack in our own way. So there's a few things that we need just to get started. We need to do a yarn add, and of course we need Tailwind CSS in order to get this off the ground. But we're also going to need some Babel packages, and we're going to need some Webpack packages too. So I'm going to come over here and just use this as a reference. This is a project that I've been working on. For instance, we're going to need this Babel plugin module resolver. We need this wrap.in.js just to help out next. We're going to need glob, and we're going to need PostCSS loader and easy import. We're going to need a raw loader, and we're going to need a Sass loader as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and get this started. So we got yarn add, Tailwind CSS. Alright, so we need Sass loader, we need PostCSS loader, we need raw loader, We need a Babel plugin module resolver. We need a Babel plugin wrap in JS. What else did we need? Alright, so we've got you, we've got you. We want glob, which is gonna, just allow us to kind of parse through some of the Webpack files that we need. Alright, and then we also need this PostCSS easy import, and that's going to help us out with some things that Tailwind forces us to do. And also it's going to help us out with SCSS as well. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to do PostCSS easy import. I think that's it. Raw loader, PostCSS loader, Sass loader, Tailwind CSS. Alright, so we're going to add all those, and it might take us a little time. Yours is probably going to go a lot slower than mine, just because I have most of these already installed. I installed them recently, and Yarn kind of pulls back from your cache and just kind of builds from it, which is what makes it so much neater than NPM, I think. But if you're using NPX, you can do whatever you need with that too. This is just my video compiler thing. It's being annoying. Alright, so we have all our dependencies installed now. What we're actually going to do is we're going to create a .babel RC file. And I'm just going to reference this file that I have here, and I'll go through and explain what we're doing. Alright, so this is my Babel RC. I've kind of created it using a lot of Next documentation, and it took me a while to get it completely right. I mean, to add this along with the Webpack configurations, so and the PostCSS configurations. So I do want to explain what we're doing here. So this module resolver is going to help us out with just getting through our project root, making sure that all the CSS modules that we have, like this, that our styles is in the SAS or SCSS directory. And then remember in the first video when we were going over the Next.js style with the JSX stuff, we actually need to wrap all the stuff in JavaScript so that Next.js can use it. And then we also have this Next Babel preset, which Next gives to us. So it makes it pretty easy. This is it as far as my Babel RC right now. Feel free to drop in the comments what your Babel RC would look like if you were doing your own project. I am gonna pop over to this Next config file, and I'm going to just copy this, and this is my Webpack configuration, right? So over here in Next config, just to kind of explain the way that Next parses your SCSS, it does it after all your Webpack stuff. So this needs to be the last thing in the file to let Next know that it should expect to get some Sass stuff. So I'm just going to paste in this Webpack file here, and I'm going to go through it. So we're bringing in path and glob, and this is to help us out with some of the Webpack configurations that we need to do. So basically what we're doing is we're taking a I don't want this to be like a Webpack tutorial or anything like that, but basically we're taking this emit file loader, and we're telling it to take whatever file fits this test, a CSS or an SCSS file, and actually distribute it to this distribution directory, which actually lives in this .next file and this .distribution. You'll see here that this static sheet, this is something that Next.js created for us, and we can tell here that we don't actually have our auto prefixing or anything like that. So it's not actually working the way that we would hope it to work. So if we give it these configurations, we just want to make sure that we're putting the file in the place that Next.js is looking for it, and that's also going to be the same file that is going to be our global style sheet, and that's linked in our head here. So then we're going to test any CSS files, and we're going to use a Babel loader, raw loader, and our PostCSS loader. And this is going to be after Webpack has already compiled it down from SCSS. We're going to then put in our SCSS loaders, and we can see here that we're using a regular expression to say that we can use either Sass or we can use SCSS, and we're going to pass it through our Babel loader, our raw loader, our PostCSS loader, and then we're going to give it this Sass loader as an object, because we're going to need to give it some options and some configurations. So up here, we know that in our Babel file, we know that the root is the project root, and that's where it should start looking for its configurations and stuff like that. And it also knows that the styles is living in this SCSS directory. So basically all we need to do is we need to include that SCSS, and we need to include node modules, just in case we want to run anything from Bower or like Bootstrap, and we're going to be using Tailwind. But it's going to map all those files and just kind of do everything that we need to do, and then we're just going to return the configuration back to Webpack so that Next can use it, and then we'll just give it this with Sass stuff again. So I'll have all of this, this whole, if you don't want to type it out yourself, I'll have everything up on GitHub, and you'll be able to look at it yourself and copy and paste it over if that's what you want to do. But I created this just by looking at Next.js issues on GitHub and reading some of the documentation. It was a little cryptic and hard to get through, so if you're not great at putting together Webpack configurations like me, I'm not great at putting together Webpack configurations. I'm sure this could be optimized by somebody who's a Webpack guru, but for our purposes, it is going to work. There is just one more thing that we need to do to get this working with Tailwind, is we need to come to our PostCSS configuration, and we need to require 2 more plugins. So we went ahead and we installed this PostCSS Easy Import, because now that we're going to be running a Tailwind through our Express server and with Webpack and everything, we need to be able to import with our Sass files, and that's what this PostCSS Easy Loader or Easy Import is going to be doing for us. So So I'll just come back over here and I'll look at my PostCSS configuration, and I'm just going to copy this and bring it over. And this is it. This is really all we need to get going. We need our PostCSS Easy Import, and we're going to prefix it with an underscore, so that's so that we can bring in our our vars and stuff like that for SCSS. And then we're going to require Tailwind CSS, the node module, and we're going to pass Tailwind our Tailwind.js configuration. So in order to get Tailwind running, we need that configuration file. So here, Tailwind gives you this default configuration, which is pretty massive, but the cool thing is you can just delete whatever it is you don't need. Whatever you don't use, you don't have to keep. But this gives you, like I said, 13,000 different options. So I'm just going to copy that directly from the documentation, and I'm going to stay out of my next folder. And what I'll do here is I will what's going on here? Okay, there we go. Oh, what that was. Tailwind.js, and I'll paste this default configuration in here, and basically this is going to create a style rule for every single one of these colors. So like this colors thing, I don't want to get too deep into Tailwind, but basically it's going to create all these classes, and like our default pink or our default purple is going to be using these colors, and we can overwrite them. And then every color is going to have a light, a lighter, or a lightest. And then we basically are just going to tell Tailwind to use all of our configurations. So for instance, if you wanted to do responsive stuff for your class, you would just do dot small. If you're doing mobile devices here, like dot small for your class name, and then you do a colon, and then you do your utility. So you would do like dot purple lightest, and that'll say on small screens apply the purple lightest class. So Tailwind's really cool. It allows you to do like a lot of custom configurations. Fonts, these are all the default fonts that come, so you just say like font sans or font serif, font mono. All the text sizes are done with rems, and it's nice enough to give you all of the pixel equivalencies, but having all of these is really good because it allows you to have much more consistent design. Basically you can add or subtract anything you want from this. But I'm not going to go through this whole Tailwind thing. Like I said, that Adam guy, he really knocked it out of the park. So you want to look at that for sure. So that finishes up all our configuration. So we should expect that when we run our yarn run dev, that everything works. It's going to apply our Babel RC, and it's going to compile. And if we come over to localhost 3000, looks like Next.js is still compiling, which is, here we go. Alright, so we have an error, build failed, cannot find module plugin / container in navbar CSS. What? Oh, okay. Alright. Oh, perfect. So this is why it's not working. So in our SCSS, we actually want to do a couple of imports. So we need our @Tailwind preflight, and then we need @Tailwind utilities. I believe that's it. Yeah, so @preflight @utilities, and basically what that's going to do is it is going to allow us to have Tailwind added to our project here. So if we save now, let me just restart this server. So now we should get all of our Tailwind classes, and it's going to create a massive style sheet. Error navbar CSS. Let's see if that's still applying. Cannot find module /plugins container. Alright, and that's an issue with Tailwind at 871. Is that correct? Maybe this is something that came from the default Tailwind configuration. So let's see here, 871 /plugin /container. So let me see in my project what I've done to kind of correct that. Oh, actually I think I know why. We need to tell Tailwind to use the default configuration. So let's see if that runs. I'll restart, and I'll go ahead and I'll save this navbar so that next restarts. let's see what I have here. 871. Okay, so this is the default Tailwind stuff. We're not getting some of the features. Like I said, Tailwind is really, I think, more used for Laravel. So we're not getting some of the default stuff here. So let me see if I rerun this. Hopefully it'll work now. If not, then there's a definite issue that I need to troubleshoot. And it works. But we're not getting our navbar CSS. So why is that happening? Like, why is this mark not actually coming in on our this mark? It's not getting our navbar CSS. It's actually being overwritten here by you know, the usual stuff that the style sheet usually gives you. I'm sorry, there's a noise outside and I got distracted. So this is actually created by Tailwind, I believe. It says add correct background color in IE9, blah, blah, blah. And it's coming from style CSS, so we know that's coming from Tailwind. So in order to get around this, what I have found is probably going to be the best way here is, let me just zoom out here so I can make sense of all this, but close to the right, close to the right. So I'm just going to move the navbar below my style.css, and we reload, we actually get those styles added. So, you know, the same rules apply from any CSS. It's all specificity. But, you know, you need to make sure you're careful with how you're adding in your components and make sure that they're after your styles. And I would go as far to say to keep it looking like this. Have all your next, have all your you know, CSS or whatever you need to add for your head, and then bring in your custom components afterwards. One more thing to note is that this this static folder now is going to have just a crazy amount. Now we have 20,000 lines of CSS because of Tailwind. And that's because we're using the default Tailwind configuration. So I think the philosophy of Tailwind is that, you know, basically remove whatever it is that you don't use and then keep everything else. So they want to give you all of these options so that you can basically use whatever you need, and then whatever you don't need, you just cut directly out of your project. So like, for instance, what if I said, like, I'm not going to use any yellow, orange, or red? Then I'll just go ahead and delete that, and I'll save. And we got next recompiling here because there's a change in the root. So if we come back to our style.css, we actually just removed about 3,000 different CSS rules. So this can be as laser focused as you want it to be. So like, for instance, if all you wanted in your style sheet was you know, blue and gray for colors, and then let's say you're not going to support mono fonts, and you actually everything's going to have the same font weight or whatever, whatever you wanted to do as far as like width. So this is kind of cool because it allows you to define widths on any of your utility classes, which is really sweet, and then a height on any of your utility classes. So basically, if you had an image, you could give it a class of like width like 8, height 6, and then you know, add your source or whatever. But then you can keep your aspect ratio because everything is done with these rems. And you know, basically, if you know what you're doing, you're gonna have a great time with this. And that's kind of, I think, the idea of like why it was created. But we can see here that it does give you a ton of rules. It gives you a massive, like, your own utility framework basically. But again, I just removed 4,000 or 6,000 CSS rules in what, 3 seconds. So you can really do anything you want here with Tailwind. And I'll make sure that I get the actual Tailwind configuration that I have here in my project, so that you can have it in yours, because it looks like the default one that comes from Tailwind CSS is actually built more for other kinds of projects, and with Next.js it might not work as well. But if you needed to add anything else, then you can just go ahead and add it to your packages, and that should take care of any issues that you have with that. So just as a refresher, if anybody is interested in Tailwind, then definitely check it out. But what we were able to do is we were able to use these imports for Tailwind with pre-flight, which gives you all of this configuration, and then utilities, which creates all your classes, and then we have our own. So I'm just gonna like kind of look at a couple of classes from Tailwind and show you kind of why it's so nice. So for instance, if we wanted this to be like there we go. So if we wanted to actually go ahead and grab some Tailwind classes, let's see here. What do I have? So yeah, we could do it like this. Alright, so we could do class name equals background, which is BG, blue, lightest. And then if we save that and take a look, it should, yeah, so we get this blue background here, and then we want to give it, like, I don't know, like a padding on the top of 6 rems and a padding on the sides of like 4 rems. Then we can do that, and it'll give us all that padding. And then let's say that like we can give it a container class, so it gives you a container, but unlike Bootstrap, it won't automatically like resize it for you. So let's see. Actually, let me move that container down here. I'll say container, just to kind of show you. I believe it's container. Go to my navbar component. Class name equals container. I just want some instant gratification here. It's not doing it for me. Of course, Emmet's not working either. I don't know what's going on right now. So just copy this about page. Alright, so now we get all that, and if we actually wrap this in a div, and class name equals container. Alright, what the heck? I know how to do this. Dot container. Breakpoint none with 100%. Oh, okay, right. I would have thought that would have worked. But anyway, this MX Auto is going to give you like automatically center your margins and everything. I do recommend that you take a look at all the Tailwind configurations and do it the best way that you see fit. There's a lot of customizing that you can do with this, and one of the coolest features is let's say that this BG blue lightest PY6 PX4, let's say that is going to be 3 utilities that we use on every single section, so we obviously don't want to have this on like all of our pages, right? We don't want to have to do this and then have like all this ugly CSS class declarations to look at. If we did do that, like obviously it would work, and we came here, then we still see that it works, but it gives you a lot less opportunity to be consistent. So we could actually give this a class of page. Oops. We give this a class of page section, for instance, and we'll say page section. And we come here and we lose all our styles, but we come back over to style.scss and we can actually do page section, and we can tell it to apply, which is a Tailwind operator, and then we put all our class names here. So we just put these as class names and then save, and it should recompile here. If you do get an error with some of your compilations, it could be because Tailwind has some classes that you can't use this apply, and it's because they use pseudo selectors, and it doesn't allow you to use utilities like that, because the whole idea is to have really maintainable code that has like clear relationships, and if you start adding in like all those pseudo classes and pseudo selectors, then you're going to start getting spaghetti code pretty quickly. But this dot page section, we're able to apply 3 utilities to it, and then use it in our classes like automatically, and it looks exactly the same. And that's kind of where Tailwind shines, is you're allowed to create all your utilities, and then when you notice patterns, you can kind of abstract them away into more detailed classes. But that's going to do it for this video. It's a little bit long just because I wanted to talk more about Tailwind. I don't know many people knowing it, so it's something I just wanted to bring up and just kind of show as an option away from those massive UI frameworks, especially when we're talking about something like server-side React, which is really expensive because it's really resource intensive. So when you put it on your server, you want to make sure that you have kind of the most optimized version of your code. So if you are using Bootstrap, try and make sure that you use the node modules, or the if you're using Bower or if you're using npm, it doesn't matter, but make sure that you're keeping your code base as small as you can, because you want your CSS to be as optimized as possible, so that you're not sending out huge massive files every time you want to serve a page, because React is pretty thirsty and it takes up a lot of server resources. So it's just something I wanted to mention, and kind of a reason why you would use a utility framework that you can control very easily. Like I showed you, you can get rid of 6,000 CSS declarations just by going to this config file and just making it your own. So chances are you will never need all these colors. You might only need 4 or 5, or maybe 12 with some accents, but it's going to end up giving you much cleaner code, much more understandable, and you'll be able to implement your designs a little bit better. So that's it for this one. In the next video, I'll be showing you some more stuff with Express and how to set up your universal routes and the isomorphic unfetch library. So thanks for sticking with me on this one, and hopefully your Webpack configurations go well. Thanks.